Is not always better. Small can be mighty, and in the world of automobiles, many cars pack a surprising punch. These pint-sized vehicles combine quirky design, clever engineering, and big personality. These are 20 cool mini cars you won't believe actually exist. Number 20. Bruche Mopetta. Next up, we have a very funny-looking little egg-shaped sort of vehicle. This is the Bruche Mopetta. It is a single-seat car with 3 wheels that was built between 1956 and 1958. Only 14 of these little things were ever made. Designed by Egon Bruche, this version was the smallest of a series of microcars that the company had produced. The vehicles are considered open roadsters as they have one wheel at the front and are equipped with, in some instances, a detachable folding hood. They use a 50cc engine with a 3-speed gearbox and a pull start, and at top speed the Mopetta could reach a totally wild 22 miles per hour. It had a fuel efficiency of about 92 miles per gallon. Only 5 of the original 14 are known to have survived, and there was a plan to have these microcars manufactured and distributed by the German automobile manufacturer Opel, but they never got any further in the process than printing the sales brochures. Perhaps there just isn't all that much call for a dolly-sized Deathmobile roadster that can travel as fast as a granny on a tricycle. Weird. Now it's time for the sweet topic. Look at how cool this car is. Granted, it can only carry one person, and they need to be relatively short and quite good at folding themselves up. But these little one-person pods are a prototype being developed in Vietnam. As more and more people live solitary lives, the idea is that cars like this might be the way forward. As always, let me know your thoughts in the comments section down below by using the hashtag #SweetTopic. Number 19. The Peel P50. Next up, we have this silly-looking microcar from the 1960s. Back then, making novelty vehicles was all the rage, and modern hipster sorts were all cramming themselves into weird, dinky little bubble cars and the like. The Peel P50 is a 3-wheeled mini vehicle that was manufactured between 1962 and 1965 by the Peel Engineering Company that was based on the Isle of Man in the UK. In 2010, the Guinness Book actually named this little car as the smallest production car ever. And, I mean, just look at it. It's so ridiculously tiny, it doesn't even seem real. Anyways, it was initially advertised in the 1960s as having enough space inside to fit one adult and one shopping bag. Which, seems practical. This little car only has one door, one windscreen wiper, and one headlight, and it came in a selection of colors. It can be purchased in red, white, or blue, which is very patriotic, I'm sure. And when it was manufactured in 1963, it would retail at 199 British pounds sterling. Nowadays, that translates to about 4,433 pounds. You would think that there wouldn't be such a call for an impractical novelty car, but Peel actually produced 50 units of the P50, and at least 27 of those are believed to still exist. They rarely come onto the market, as most of them are in car collections. But one did come up for auction at Sotheby's back in 2016 and sold for a surprising $176,000 United States dollars. Number 18. The Velam Isetta. Next up, another sort of bubble car, where this one is the Velam Isetta. This car, like many others that we've had a look at today, had the characteristic egg or bubble sort of shape, and that's how these cars in general became known collectively as bubble cars. This particular one is a microcar that was designed in Italy and then licensed for manufacture in several different countries. These were made in Argentina, Spain, Belgium, France, Brazil, Germany, and the UK, and the BMW Isetta that was built in 1955 was the first mass-produced car that managed a fuel consumption of just 78 miles per gallon. Or rather, 3 liters per 100 kilometers. Crazily, there were over 160,000 units of the vehicle actually sold. In 1954, the manufacturer got the license to produce the Isetta in France. They developed a different body than the BMW version, but kept the same engine. The body was much rounder and more egg-shaped, but it was called the yogurt pot by the French. There was also a convertible version as well as a luxury model that was introduced in 1957, and 500 of which were built. But then there was a single record car that was built for a roadster body. This tiny vehicle set numerous records in the sub-250cc class in 1957. Number 17. The Smart Fortwo. Mercedes-Benz Group has been producing all kinds of smart cars for ages, and they seem to be very, very popular. This is the Smart Fortwo, a two-seat city car that's been produced since 1998 all the way through to 2024. Now, in the third generation, this car has its engine in the rear and has a rear-wheel drive layout. The cars have been sold across 46 different countries around the world and sold an astonishing 1.7 million by 2015. These are available in a 3-door hatchback version or a 2-door convertible, and they make parking in tight spaces and city traffic a whole lot easier, but they're not all that ideal if you have to transport any additional people or things. This thing is so iconic, though, that the Museum of Modern Art, MoMA, in New York City added a first-generation Fortwo to its permanent collection. So it isn't only smart, apparently it's also art. Who even knew? Number 16. The 1967 Fiat 500. Now we're going to talk about the 1967 Fiat 500, because if there was ever a car that defined small but mighty, this one might be it. First off, it wasn't only a car, it was the car for post-war Italy. By 1967, the world was deep into the swinging 60s, and this tiny and cheerful-looking machine was buzzing about the narrow European streets, weaving between Vespas and proving that you didn't need a massive engine to have a good time. It was powered by a 499cc two-cylinder engine, which is less power than some modern motorcycles, but that made it all the more charming. And with just 18 horsepower, you weren't going to win any races, but that wasn't the point. It was light and nimble and featured a rear-engine layout, so it handled way better than you would expect from something that looks like it should be in a Pixar movie. There were no frills and no excess. It was just a tiny and lovable car that made driving feel like an adventure. Number 15. The Citroën C0. Here we have a vehicle that first hit the streets back in 2010 when EVs were still of a more niche curiosity than they were a mainstream option, but even today, it still has charm that makes it stand out. The vehicle is small, like really, really small, so if you're used to a big sedan or an SUV, this thing feels like a go-kart compared to those in the best way possible. It's designed to squeeze into the tightest of parking spots, dart through narrow city streets, and make traffic jams slightly less soul-crushing. Under the hood, you've got a 16-kilowatt battery that powers a 66-horsepower electric motor. So it may not be much, but in a car that barely weighs a ton, it still has plenty of zip when it comes to city driving. You won't exactly be drag racing, but you will be silently gliding past gas stations with a smug smile on your face. It gets to around 90 miles on a full charge, which isn't exactly groundbreaking, but when it comes to urban commutes, it gets the job done. It has fast charging capability, so you can get it juiced up in about 30 minutes, just enough time to grab a coffee and wonder why more cars aren't this easy to deal with. It may not be the flashiest of all cars out there, but it does have a certain kind of no-nonsense appeal, and it's one of those cars that makes sense if you live in a busy city and just need something that's efficient, practical, and kind of adorable to get around with on short trips. Number 14. The Nissan Pivo. If there was ever a vehicle that looked like it rolled straight out of a science fiction movie, well, the Nissan Pivo may just be that. It wasn't just a car though, it was actually a concept, and Nissan's wild attempt at what the future of urban driving may have looked like. It was first unveiled in 2005 and looked something like you would expect seeing on the Jetsons. It was compact, bubbly, and full of ideas that were way ahead of its time. The coolest feature of the car was undoubtedly the rotating cabin. Instead of dealing with a tight U-turn or a tricky parking maneuver, the entire cockpit could spin 360 degrees. That meant that you no longer had to do any kind of reversing. You just turned around and off you went. It's the kind of thing that made you wonder why all cars don't function the same way. Underneath it all was a fully electric motor that ran on Nissan's early lithium-ion battery technology. It wasn't exactly built for speed, and speed wasn't the point. It was designed for small drives in cities where space is tight and efficiency is king. By 2007, they doubled down with the Pivo 2, which looked even more wild. That version had 4 independently rotating wheels, so it could crab walk sideways in order to get into a parking spot. It had a little AI-powered robot companion on the dashboard that would talk to you, because why wouldn't you want something creepy bothering you while you're trying to drive? While it was meant to keep drivers calm and make it feel like less of a car and more like a friendly droid, it would probably just end up creeping you out in the end. Then in 2011, they came out with the Pivo 3, which was said to be a slightly more realistic take. It got rid of some of the crazy features, but still kept that ultra-compact electric city car concept alive. It also introduced autonomous parking, which is something that everybody thought would be way in the future, but has now become standard. Because let's face it, we're all too lazy to just turn around. Good luck passing your driving test! Number 13. The Zündapp Janus. If there was ever a car that looked like it couldn't make up its mind in which way it wanted to go, it would be the Janus. Built in 1957 by a German company known as Zündapp, which were best known for making motorcycles, the result of their efforts became one of the most weird and charming microcars ever made. One standout feature was the doors. Instead of just having a regular old side entry, it had a front door and a rear door, kind of like a two-faced little time machine. The idea was that no matter where you sat, you had the same experience whether you were facing forward or backward. There was no back seat, so to speak, in the traditional sense, and passengers actually sat back to back, which was both brilliant and kind of uncomfortable and bizarre. The small engine in the vehicle put out a thrusting 14 horsepower, which meant a top speed of about 50 miles per hour, presumably if you were by yourself, and assuming that you had a little patience and a slight downhill momentum to get you going. It may not have been fast, but it was designed for efficiency and not for speed. The design was said to come from an aircraft manufacturer, which might explain why it looks a little bit like a tiny spaceship, and the name Janus comes from the two-faced Roman god of doors, transitions, and looking both forward and backward, which is a perfect name for a car that can't make up its mind. As cool as it may have seemed to some people, it was not exactly a hit. Less than 7,000 units were made before they pulled the plug in 1958. Number 12. The Mitsubishi Mi-EV. First hitting the streets in 2009, the Mi-EV was one of the first mass-produced all-electric cars on the market. And before Tesla was making waves and Nissan Leaf came to be the go-to, Mitsubishi was already out there proving that small and quirky EVs could work in the real world. It may not have been flashy, and it wasn't trying to exactly be futuristic. It was just a simple and efficient city car that happened to run on electricity. It stood out for its ultra-narrow jelly bean-like shape. Originally based on the gasoline-powered Mitsubishi i, it was designed for Japan's kei car market, basically a category of tiny cars that were made to fit in the tight streets while also getting some tax breaks. One of the coolest things about the vehicle was that it was sold under multiple names. In Europe, Peugeot and Citroën rebadged it as the Peugeot Ion and the Citroën C0, and that made it one of the first true shared platform EVs. It was basically the same car, just with a different badge stuck on the front. While it did not exactly become a bestseller, it did pave the way for the everyday EVs that we see today, proving that electric cars didn't have to be luxury toys or weird kind of messed up science projects. They could simply just be a car. And honestly, with cities getting more crowded and small EVs making a comeback, perhaps it's time for a little Mi-EV revival. Number 11. The Foldamobile Microcar. This teeny-weeny little offering to the world of automobiles was produced in Germany between 1950 and 1969. There were a few different dinky little Fundamobile types, and this particular one is the Type N, nicknamed the Silver Flea. These were manufactured between February and June of 1951 and it's believed that about 48 of the N-Type were produced during that time. They featured a wooden framework which was often covered with plywood sheets for the car's external paneling that was then covered with synthetic leather. This type of material was commonly used for cars in the 1920s, but it came back into use in post-war Germany in the 1950s because of the scarcity of sheet metal during that era. It also helped that this material was extremely cheap to manufacture, as well as being much more readily available. There are, however, naturally drawbacks to making a car out of fabric. It is hardly durable when compared to metal, nor does it look especially great, to be honest, but it was a case of needs, and it worked for the time. The Silver Flea was so called because it was a version which was built with hammered aluminum bodywork, and it was, of course, quite tiny. So it fit the description pretty well. The Silver Flea was the beginning of better bodywork for the Type N Fundamobile. Things became more consistent and more in keeping with what people had expected from a vehicle, even if they were still very small indeed. Number 10. The Peugeot BB1. The Peugeot BB1 was an ambitious concept car unveiled in 2009 that aimed to redefine urban mobility. At just 2.5 meters long, it was shorter than a smart car, yet somehow it had also managed to seat up to 4 passengers, perhaps very, very small people, making it one of the most space-efficient designs of all time. The vehicle took its inspiration from scooters and motorcycles rather than a traditional car, and the seating arrangement resembled a motorbike posture, with the driver and front passenger sitting upright, gripping handlebars, instead of a conventional steering wheel. It allowed for maximum space utilization and an incredibly compact frame. Oh, and it was also fully electric. Designed for short city commutes, it featured in-wheel motors that were developed by Michelin, an innovative approach that eliminated the need for a bulky drivetrain and also freed up interior space. It came with a panoramic glass roof and a tall upright stance that provided a commanding view of the road. The doors opened in a unique rear-hinged fashion, and that allowed easy access even when it was in tight spaces. While it never made it to production, its influence can still be seen in modern urban EV concepts. It was a bold experiment in rethinking how people move through the city while prioritizing efficiency, small tight spaces, and innovation over traditional car design. Number 9. The Renault Twizy. Now we have a modern miniature car, and tell me, is it just me, or are these new versions of things just way uglier and less appealing than their vintage counterparts? This one looks like a really ugly toy that's languishing in the bargain bin since no child actually wants to play with it. The Renault Twizy is a 2-seater electric microcar. There are 2 models, the 45 and the 80, and apparently these numbers also indicate the top speeds that they can achieve in kilometers per hour. Although they were initially manufactured in Spain, the production of this thing was moved to South Korea because apparently there was a greater demand for these vehicles in Asia. The production run ended altogether in September of 2023, and it was replaced by the equally grotesque Mobilized Duo quadricycle. Ugh! When this vehicle first appeared, it was a concept car that was shown at the Frankfurt Motor Show in 2009. Then in March of 2012, it was released in France and shortly after in the rest of Europe. But despite there being 3 models, none of them came with a battery pack. This had to be rented separately at a monthly fee. But what do you think of this incredibly unattractive vehicle? Perhaps you love it. Go on and unleash all your fury in the comments down below, because that's what they're there for after all. Number 8. The Messerschmitt KR200. Now we have a cute-looking bubble car that was designed by the same company that made all of the Nazi fighter planes in the Second World War. Ha, weird. It seems that what happened was that after the Second World War, Messerschmitt, the erstwhile aeroplane makers, were banned from making any more war equipment, or actually any kind of aircraft at all. And so they turned their designing skills to road-based vehicles. And what with all the shortages and also the fashions and fads in car design in the 50s, they made another one of those bubble cars that everybody enjoyed so much. The KR200 was also known as the Cabin Roller, which means scooter with a cabin in German. Almost 12,000 were built during the first year of production, and it was essentially a runaway success. They made a whole bunch of them, and then when West Germany joined NATO, the company was allowed to start making aircraft once again, and the number of cars they produced immediately dwindled to very few. They finally ceased production of these microcars in 1964. Number 7. The Honda Microcommuter Prototype. Here we have a vehicle that looks exactly what you would expect from a company imagining the future of urban transportation. A tiny and boxy pod-like car with a sharply upright stance and large windows. It makes it look more like a high-tech appliance than it does a traditional car. Because, you know, you've always wanted to drive around the city in a toaster, haven't you? The reason is simple though. As with all other microcars, it maximizes space efficiency and makes the smallest footprint possible. The Honda Microcommuter Prototype was designed with a modular interior, and that meant that it could be reconfigured for many different uses. One version had space for a driver and 2 passengers, but another could be converted into a single-seater with cargo space, which is perfect for last-mile deliveries or urban businesses. Honda also integrated a removable tablet-style dashboard, and that allowed drivers to control various functions and interact with navigation, entertainment, and vehicle data in a more intuitive way than the standard dashboard would. Because you need to be fiddling with the dashboard while you're driving, right? The car even supported swappable battery packs, which allowed for quick recharging without having to wait. One key feature was its vehicle-to-grid technology, meaning that it could store and share electricity with homes or even the power grid itself, an idea that's only now becoming mainstream with newer EVs. While this car never made it past the prototype stage, it did showcase Honda's forward vision for an ultra-compact smart city vehicle. Number 6. The Honda New V. Imagine you're weaving through city traffic, effortlessly slipping into a tight parking spot that bigger cars wouldn't even dare attempt. You have a panoramic windshield, which gives you a clear, unobstructed view of everything around you, and as you pull up to the red light, the car's AI assistant will casually, yet creepily, remind you that there's a coffee shop nearby that you usually stop at around this time. Because it's always watching you, waiting for the perfect moment to murder you. And that's the concept behind a car that thinks for you. The Honda New V's standout feature was its built-in Emotion Engine AI, which Honda had called HANA, or the Honda Automated Network Assistant. But it wasn't only a voice assistant, it was designed to learn from your habits, suggest routes and stops, and even give you entertainment based on your past behaviors. It could even recognize emotions through voice tone and facial expression, adjusting the driving experience accordingly. Pair that up with one of your teenage robot dolls and you'll never leave your car ever again. Perhaps one of the most unique concepts behind this vehicle was its ability to function as an autonomous ride-sharing vehicle when you weren't using it. The idea would be that while you were at work or home, your car would then go out and pick up other passengers, essentially making money for you instead of just sitting around parked all day. Honda had envisioned this as a way for EV owners to offset their costs and maximize the efficiency of their vehicles, while also hoping that random strangers would clean out your fast food wrappers and deal with the smell of your parps. Like many other concept prototype vehicles, it featured the vehicle-to-grid technology, meaning that it could store and send power back to the grid or even power a home during an outage. Though it never made it to production, it did show Honda's forward-thinking approach to AI integration, urban mobility, and car-sharing economies, which will be an absolute big thing in the future and will take us all over. Because why even enjoy driving anymore? In many ways, the ideas, like emotion-based AI and vehicle-to-grid capabilities, are only just now starting to make their way into modern electric vehicles, but who knows what they may do to us in the future. Number 5. The Heinkel Cabine. Next up, we have another bubble car from the late 1950s. Europe was just mad for these diminutive oddities for a brief period of time, it would seem. The Heinkel Cabine was another microcar, where this time there were a few different models that were produced under license by a few companies. The Model 150 had a 174cc 9.2 horsepower single-cylinder 4-stroke engine, This was the same thing that had powered the scooter that was designed by the same company. That gives you a great indication of the power that this thing put out, i.e., not a whole lot. Then in 1956, they brought the Model 153 that had 3 wheels and the Model 154 that had 4 wheels. These both utilized 204cc engines, but these engines were later reduced to 198 for insurance purposes. These funny little gnome cars had a steel body and opened at the front. It had a fabric sunroof and the fancy inclusion of a reverse gear. Yes, many other bubble car types did not have the ability to reverse. What a fun one. Number 4. The Volkswagen XL1. Here we have what appears to be one of the most awesome vehicles ever made, so it just makes you wonder why you don't see it more. The Volkswagen XL1 is a car that seems as though it came straight out of a futuristic concept drawing, except that it was actually built. It's low, sleek, and shaped like a teardrop, all in the name of aerodynamics, and sits just 45 inches tall, shorter than a Lamborghini, and has a drag coefficient that's insanely low. The rear wheels are partially covered and the side mirrors are ditched in favor of tiny cameras. Even the tires are skinny in order to reduce rolling resistance. Oh, and it also gets a ridiculous 313 miles per gallon. Yes, you heard that right, 313 miles per gallon. In fact, it can go about 30 miles on electric power alone. And that makes you wonder why it never made it to mass market, but then when you look at the $150,000 price tag, you get a much better idea. Number 3. The Honda Acti. Introduced in 1977, the Honda Acti was designed to fit in Japan's key truck regulations, which meant it had to be small, efficient, and practical for both urban and rural use. The size made it perfect for navigating the dense streets of Japan, while also being a surprising utility vehicle made for farmers, shop owners, and delivery workers. It was built with a focus on reliability and simplicity, equipping it with a small but durable engine that prioritized efficiency over power. It may not have been built for speed, but its lightweight frame and smart engineering meant that it could handle more than the size suggested. In 2021, key truck regulations evolved and Honda had to shift focus toward newer models. However, the legacy of this vehicle lives on, and it's still in use today, not only in Japan but around the world. Number 2. The Mini Rocketman. While not being a specialized car that was designed for Elton John, it was a vehicle that was said to be the future of small urban cars. At just 3.4 meters long, which is smaller than the original Mini, the Rocketman was made to be the ultimate urban runabout with the goal of providing maximum interior space in an incredibly compact exterior. It was a blending of Mini's classic look and modern styling with more sharp lines, futuristic lighting, and bold features like scissor doors that opened upward to give easy access to the interior in tight spaces. Like all other small cars, it was based in efficiency and not really power, and also being compact enough to zip around the streets and fit into tight areas without a lot of problems. Unfortunately, like a lot of miniature vehicles, it only got to the concept stage and never made it to production. Number 1. The 1976 Bellier Velato 50 microcar. Here we have the direct descendant of the most early post-war European trend of small and expensive cars, designed for people who didn't need a full-sized vehicle but still wanted the convenience of a four-wheeled transport. This vehicle ran on a 50cc engine and, as with most microcars, it was economical in terms of fuel consumption and could be parked just about anywhere, making it perfect for the cramped city environment. It had an open cockpit-style cabin allowing for ease of access, which also kept down on the vehicle's weight, while the engine made it nimble enough for urban navigation. It was never produced on a large scale, but did find its place in the world of budget transportation for people who were looking for something simple and functional. The microcar market at the time was flooded with similar vehicles. However, this one stood out for its distinctive design and minimalistic charm. Well, that's about all from the teeniest, tiniest little cars that were ever made in the world and some that never made it to production. What did you think about these vehicles? Would you own one? Even if you were as tall as me at 6'4"? Let me know down in the comments below. Check out the other cool things that are showing up on the screen, and I will see you next time.